Nisam čuo, nije bilo prevoda.
I'm afraid I didn't hear your question. There was no interpretation.
How long would you want with this witness? There being just this session left.
Pogledao sam u pauzi da skratim maksimalno, trudit ću da
I
završim
did my
u
best
5-6 minuta.
to shorten it as far as possible during the break, so I think perhaps 5 or 6 minutes, maybe a few minutes more.
Very well. Yes, Mr. Milosevic. Mr. Nice, one matter. We'll have to deal with these administrative matters first thing on Monday morning. It's absurd that we miss the opportunity so regularly because of circumstances quite beyond the control of the court. But so the first session next Monday, we will deal with the matters concerning the witnesses on which we must rule. Yes, Mr. Milosevic.
Microphone, please. The microphone was not switched on.
Yes.
Rekao sam da
I was saying
bi trebalo da se vratimo na javnu sednicu.
we ought to go back into open session.
We aren't in open session. We certainly should be. I think
We're in open session, Your Honor.
my impression is we've been in open session for some time.
Molim vas, pogledajte ovaj
Would you please take a
drugi
look
transkript
at the second
razgovora
transcript
koji je juče
of
pušten, to je
the
u tabulatoru 6,
conversation played yesterday, and that is tab 6.
gde razgovaraju
And
Legija
talking there
i
are Legija
Ražnjatović.
and Ražnjatović.
Neću ceo transkript da čitam jer sam
I
vas
won't
već
read
pitao
out the whole of the transcript because I've already asked you
za to na šta se odnosi,
about it,
na
about
koga
what
se
it
odnosi,
refers
to
to
smo
and who the
ustanovili,
speakers
ovo
are.
što
We've
kaže
already
smradovi
established
i tako
that,
dalje.
these stinkers and so on.
Na kraju stranice
But at the end
govori
of the
da je
page,
zaustavljeno 7200
He says that
izbjeglica,
7,200 refugees were stopped,
govori o Mladiću,
and he speaks
koji je
about
komandant
Mladić,
vojne oblasti,
who
u
was
to
the
vreme,
commander
to
of the
vam je
military
poznato,
district at that
pretpostavljam
time. I assume you know about all that. Answer yes.
Pretpostavljam da znate da još uvijek
And I
JNA,
assume you know that it was still the
koja
JNA
se povlači, koja je bila napadnuta,
which was withdrawing
poznato.
and being attacked. Are you aware of that? Answer yes.
I onda on kaže,
And then he goes on to
zvao je
say
Panića,
that he called Panić,
dakle, pretpostavljenog u Beogradu,
the superior in
kaže,
Belgrade,
rekao
and he
Panić
said,
da
Panić
se
said
oni puste,
that they should be
dakle, da
released.
se ti ljudi
That
koji
is to
su
say that the
zadržani,
people who had been
on govori o
stopped there, and
7200
he
ljudi,
mentioned
puste,
7,200 people, should
kao
be
mi smo
released,
human narod.
that we are a humane
Malo se ruga
people.
Paniću,
That's what he
što
said,
je
and
to
he's making
rekao,
fun
ali
of Panić a little bit for
nesumnjivo,
saying that, but without a
Panić
doubt,
traži
Panić
da se ti
is
ljudi
calling
puste,
for
da
the
se ne
release of
zadržavaju.
those people. He wants the people to be released and not
Jeste to vidjeli?
to have them stopped. Did you see that? Answer, yes, I saw it in the transcript.
Pa to je transkript ovog razgovora.
Question, so it's the transcript of that particular conversation. Answer, yes, and I heard the conversation.
Dakle, jedini s kojim
Question, so the only
se kao,
person,
što se iz transkripta vidi,
as we can see from the
komunicira
transcript,
u Beogradu,
that they are communicating
General
with in
Panić insistira
Belgrade,
da se ljudi
General
puste.
Panić is insisting
Je li to jasno?
upon the release of those individuals. Is that clear? Answer, yes.
A da li je jasno i
Question, and
to
is it also clear
što Legija u
that Legia,
ovom svom razgovoru
in this
govori
conversation,
o napadu zelenih
speaks
beretki
about an attack by
koji
the
su počeli da
Green
pucaju
Berets, which started
vojnicima i
shooting at the
konvoju.
soldiers and
To vam je pred
convoy.
kraj,
And that is
druge
towards
strane,
the
ne baš
end
pred
of the
kraj,
second
ali
page. Well, not really at the end, but
kaže,
what he says is
trebalo je da
this.
puste te vojnike
They
kad je
should
konvoj
have
krenuo iz
released the soldiers
kasarne,
when the
ovi
convoy
Juki,
left the
to misli na
barracks.
Juku Prazinu,
These
koji je počinio
Yukina
onaj
men,
masakr
he's thinking about Juka
vojnika
Prazina,
koji
who
su
committed the
napuštali
massacre
kasarnu. Da li se
of
sećate
the
tog događaja?
soldiers leaving the barracks. Do you remember the event? Yes, I do.
Kroz novine i kroz zbog gledanja TV.
I saw it on
Dobro,
television and read it
Vi
about
se
it in the
sjećate
papers.
događaja
Question, all right?
za vreme za koje
And
niste
you,
radili, a ne
you
znate ništa
remember
o ovom
events
događaju
which did not
iz
take place while you were working there, and yet you know nothing about this event
u
and the comments
Stranci Srpskog jedinstva
made
ili Srpskog
in
dobrovoljačkog
the
garde.
Party of Serbian Unity or the
Kad kaže
SDG.
glavni njihov za
When
zelene
he
berete,
says
govori
that
za
the
to
main
Juku
man for the
Prazinu, on je počeo da
Green
puca
Berets,
i
and he's
vratili
talking
se
about
nazad
Juka Prazina, he started shooting at them and they turned back. That's what it
i
says.
tako dalje.
And
Poznat
so
vam je
on.
taj događaj.
I'm sure you know about that event, do you?
Događaj ne.
Answer, not about the event, but I know about Juka Prazina, yes.
A dobro, taj Juka Prazina
Question,
nam
now
je
this
poznat samo
man
iz
Juka
novina,
Prazina, you
tako.
say you know only from the papers, is that
Pa je
it?
vam
Answer,
poznato
yes.
da je počinio
Question, well,
masakr
do you know
nad,
that he committed a
kolonom
massacre
vojnika koji su se
of a column of
povlačili iz
soldiers who were
kasarne i
withdrawing from the barracks?
JNA se izvlačila sa
And the
tih prostora.
JNA was withdrawing from the whole territory, in fact.
Ne.
Answer, no.
A dobro, pitao sam vas
Question, I also asked you,
ko je još dolazio u stranku,
who else
između ostalog
came to the
u ovoj
party
vašoj
headquarters? And
izjavi piše da je
in your
dolazio i
statement
pokojni
it
Zoran
says that
Đinđić.
the late
Kada
Zoran
je to
Đinđić
bilo?
would come by too. When was that?
Zoran Đinđić je
Answer,
bio
Zoran Đinđić
94.
was
godine.
there in 1994.
A šta je bio predmet i
Question.
u kom svojstvu je?
And what was the topic
dolazio, da li
discussed?
to
Why
znate?
did he come at all? Do you happen to know? What was the purpose of his
Dolazio je
coming?
u periodu,
Answer, he
znači,
came
rane jeseni,
in early autumn,
septembar,
which
dok
means
samo radio
September,
Stranka Srpskog jedinstva.
when the Party of Serbian Unity was just operating
Ništa više ne znate
at
o
that
tome.
time. Question, you know nothing
vi
more about
prestali
that?
da budete
Answer, no.
član Stranke
Question, did
Srpskog
you
jedinstva kad
cease
ste
being
napustili
member of the
posao u
Party of
stranci?
Serbian Unity when you left your job at the party?
Kako mislite da li sam prestala?
Answer, how do you mean
Da li
whether I
ste
stopped
prestali,
being a
vi ste
member?
kažete da ste se
Question, well,
učlanili
you
u Stranku
said
Srpskog
you became a
jedinstva
member
svojevremeno. Da li ste
of the
prestali da
Party of
budete
Serbian
član kad ste
Unity.
napustili
Did you
posao u
cease to
stranci?
be a member once you left your job
Ne,
in the
da li
party?
sam zadržala
Answer,
članstvo?
no, I kept my membership card.
A dobro, da li ste i danas član
Question,
Stranke
are
Srpskog
you a
jedinstva?
member of the Party of Serbian Unity today? Answer, well, I'm probably registered as a member because anybody who left the party would still have a membership card and therefore be on their
Dakle, vi
files.
niste član nijedne
Question,
druge
so you're
stranke.
not a member of any other party, are you? Answer, no.
A da li su članovi vaše porodice
Question, what
također
about your
članovi
family
Stranke
members?
Srpskog
Are they
jedinstva ili nekih
also
drugih stranaka?
members of the Party of Serbian Unity or perhaps members of some other party? Answer, my family members are not members of any political
Dobro,
party.
pošto ste govorili
Question,
o
all right.
dobrovoljcima,
As you spoke about volunteers
da je dobrovoljce
yourself and said that the volunteers
Arkan vodio ili
were led
slao
by Arkan or sent by
određene
Arkan to
operacije u Republiku
certain
Srpsku,
operations in Republika Srpska and the RSK.
Da li ste u to vreme znali ili
At
možda
that time,
komentarisali
did you
ili
know, or
možda
perhaps
bilo šta,
comment or anything else?
saznavali o tome koliko
Learnt
je, na
anything
primjer,
else about
dobrovoljaca
how
iz
many
Srbije
volunteers, for
i
example, went
Sandžaka,
from Serbia and
onih
Sanjak in
takozvanih
particular,
Sandžaklija,
the so-called
išlo da
men
se
from
bori
Sanjak,
na strani Alije
Sanjaklija, went to
Izetbegovića.
fight on the side of Alija Izetbegović. Do you know about that? Answer, no.
A da li uopšte znate za tu
Question, do
pojavu?
you know about this phenomenon at all that people did? Answer,
Pročitala sam.
well, I
o
read
tome,
about
znam
it in the
ništa
papers,
precizno.
but I can't
Pa pošto
say
vi
anything more
govorite
than
o
that.
tome da je
Question, well,
dobrovoljce
as you say that
uglavnom
the
da su
volunteers
dobrovoljci išli pod
were
nekakvim pokroviteljstvom državne
mostly under
bezbednosti,
the
da li
auspices of some
pretpostavljate da
DB,
i
some
ove
state
dobrovoljce
security. Can
slala
you
državna
assume then
bezbednost
that
Srbije?
these volunteers were sent by the DB of Serbia? Answer, no.
A dobro, vi govorite o jednom
You also
nasilničkom i
speak
neregularnom
about a
ponašanju
forcible and irregular conduct
članova Srpske
on
dobrovoljačke
the part
garde.
of the SDG
svedočili,
members, the
tako.
guards, and you testified about that. Isn't that right?
Odredite preciznije
Answer.
šta
Could you be
mislite
more
na nasilničko
specific?
ponašanje.
What do you mean
Pa
by
kažete da su
forceful
pljačkali,
behavior or
da
forcible?
su
Question, well, you said they looted,
razne nezakonite radnje,
They
vršili, maltretirali
perpetrated
ljude i
various
tako dalje.
unlawful acts. They mistreated people. Answer, I didn't say they looted or mistreated people.
Govorila sam samo o
All I said was that I just talked about the mistreatment of prisoners of war in Sanski Most during the operation in Banja Luka, and also the prisoners who were killed
recimo Velikoj Kladuši.
in Velika Kladuša.
A kada sam govorila o
And when I spoke about the looting and theft, if I happened to mention this by chance, I just meant the smuggling that went on. I didn't speak about
Dobro.
any looting or
Ali
thefts
ste
otherwise.
svjedočili o
Question,
tome-
all right, but you did testify.
Čini mi se bar
At least I think you
kontradiktorno
did, and I think you were a bit contradictory
da
on this
je
point.
uvek formirana jedinica
That
vojne
a
policije
unit
u
of the
okviru
military
garde
police was formed within the
i
guards
da su bili
and that
zaduženi
they were in
isključivo za
charge
pripadnike Srpske
of
dobrovoljačke
the members
garde,
of the SDG
upravo iz
only
suprotnog
them
razloga,
for
da
quite the
spreče
opposite reasons, to
krađu,
prevent them from
maltretiranje
looting,
civila,
mistreating civilians, and so on,
pljačku ili bilo šta drugo, a
theft
onda
and
kad bi se
anything else.
završila operacija,
And then
oni su
once
bili
the operation
rasformirani.
was completed, these
Jel
were
tako?
disbanded. This unit was disbanded.
A da li
Is
to
that right?
znači da
Answer,
je
yes, that's right.
Željko
Question, well,
Ražnatović,
does that then mean that
odnosno
Željko
Srpska
Ražnatović,
dobrovoljačka
or
garda,
rather the Serbian
imala
volunteer
pravila
guard,
da se
had a code of
ne
conduct,
dozvole
rules
nezakonite
which would not
radnje
permit
njenih pripadnika do
unlawful
kojih može
acts
doći
on the part of
u
its
uslovima
members,
neke vojne akcije.
which could be perpetrated in the course of a
tako ili
military
nije?
action.
Postojala
Is
su
that right?
pravila,
Answer,
ali
yes, rules did
činjenice
exist,
pokazuju
but
da
the
su
facts
se
show
nekad i ta pravila
that
kršila.
at times those rules were violated.
Ali ako je formirana
Question.
jedinica vojne
Yes,
policije
but if a
koja je
military
trebalo da
police unit
osigura,
was set up to ensure,
čak i silom primjenu
even
tih
by
pravila,
using
da
force,
li
the
to
application
znači
of those
da je
rules,
stav
doesn't that mean that it was the
komande i
position on the part of the
Ražnatovića
command
bio da se
and
nezakonite
Ražnatović
radnje
himself that
ne
any
smeju
unlawful
dešavati?
acts must
Ili
not
tako
be
ili nije?
allowed to
Tak
take
je bio
place?
takav dan.
Answer, yes, that was the
Hvala lepo.
position and view taken,
E
that's
sada
right.
govorite o
Question, thank you
zarobljenicima.
very much. Now you go on to talk
I
about the
pitao vas
prisoners
je
themselves,
gospodin
and
Nice
Mr. Nice asked you
Nešto u vezi s tim.
something in
Vi
that
kažete,
regard.
govorio
Your
da
response
nemaju
was,
zarobljenike.
he said they didn't have any
Pa ste onda
prisoners,
objasnili
that that's what he would say. And then you
da
went
ste to
on to
razumeli
explain that
tako
you
da su zarobljenici
understood that
bili
to mean
ubijeni. Jeste vi
that the
tako rekli?
prisoners were killed. Is that what you said? Answer, yes.
A dobro, istovremeno vi
Question.
svedočite
All
o
right, and
tome
at the same time,
postojao
simultaneously, you are
čovjek za
testifying to
razmenu
the fact
ratnih
that there was a man in
zarobljenika
charge
koji
of
se
the
zvao
exchange
Voja.
of prisoners of war, whose name was Voja, I believe,
i bio na radu
and that
u
he
stranci
was
Srpskog jedinstva.
working in
Tako?
the Party of Serbian Unity. Isn't that right? Answer, yes, but that same individual worked on the exchange of prisoners during 1991 and 1992.
Pa dobro, da li to onda znači
Question.
da
Well, yes.
zarobljenici nisu
Does that then
ubijani
mean that the
ili
prisoners were
ovako
not
kako ste
killed?
maločas tvrdili
Doesn't
da
it mean that?
zarobljenici jesu ubijani?
Or does it mean that the prisoners were killed, as you claimed a moment ago? Answer, the prisoners were killed, according to my knowledge, during the Banja Luka operation and in Velika Kladuša.
A dobro, kad govorite
Question. All right, now,
prema
when
vašem saznanju,
you say to the
otkud
best of
vama
your
saznanje
knowledge,
da su zarobljenici
where'd you
ubijani?
get the knowledge from, this information that the prisoners were killed? Answer, are you
Evo,
talking
na
about
primjer,
Velika
ajde uzmemo
Kladuša and
Veliku
Banja
Kladušu.
Luka? Question, well, let's take Velika Kladuša first. What about that?
Ranjenici
Answer, the wounded
koji bi
men,
dobrovoljci koji
the
su
volunteers
ranjeni u
who were
Velikoj
wounded
Kladuši,
in Velika Kladuša,
nakon vraćanja
once they had been returned
u Beograd,
to Belgrade,
što nisu bili sposobni
as they were incapacitated and not capable of going back to Velika Kladuša,
ostajali bi u štabu
they would remain
u
at
Beogradu
the headquarters in Belgrade,
i pričali bi
and they would talk.
u toku dana ponekad.
During the day sometimes, they'd talk about it.
A dobro,
Question.
da li ste vi
All
bar iz
right.
novina u to
Now,
vreme znali
did you at least
za
from the
formiranje
papers learn
autonomne
about the
pokrajine
formation of the
Zapadna
autonomous
Bosna, čiji
province
je
of
predsjednik
Western
bio
Bosnia,
Fikret
whose
Abić?
president was Fikret Abić? Answer, yes, I did
Pa
know
da li
about
znate
that.
da je Velika
Question, well, did
Kladuša
you know that
upravo
Velika
centar
Kladuša is
te
precisely the
autonomne
center
pokrajine
of that
Zapadna
autonomous province of Western Bosnia?
Pa da li
Answer,
vam je
yes.
poznato iz tog
Question, well,
vremena
do you know
da
from
su
those
vlasti
times that the
autonomne
authorities
pokrajine
of the
Zapadna
autonomous
Bosna
province of Western
imale
Bosnia
kontrolu na tom
had
teritoriju,
control over that
koju
territory?
nisu držale snage
The
Alije
territory that was
Izetbegovića?
not held by the forces of
It's
Alija
not
Izetbegović.
for the witness. All she can say is what she heard. not what she knows from reading the papers.
Pa ona govori o onome što je saznala.
Well, she's talking about what she learnt and heard about.
Did you
And I'm
hear-
asking, Mr. May,
Did you learn what you can talk about are these conversations? Did the men say that they were under the control of the Fikret Abdic or anything of that sort? Did they say who they were under the control of or not? Or did they simply say what happened?
Pričali su
they
o
just
tome,
said, they
znači,
just talked
oni su
about,
otišli tamo,
actually they went there and were under the control of the units of Fikret Abdic. However, they went off together with the members of the Red Berets, and it was their task to train Fikret's men. But at the same time, they did take part in operations together with them. And the result of that was that we had 2 men killed and about 10, between 10 and 15 others wounded. Now, after that, they would come back to headquarters to work there and they would talk about it. Talk about how people behaved towards the prisoners. And I'm thinking about the prisoners on Alia's part, how Alia behaved. And some of those people are Zenica, Mali Rambo, Little Rambo, and Gvozdeni. Those were the men who were wounded in Velika Kladuša and later on worked at the headquarters of the Serbian Volunteer Guard in Belgrade. Question, all right, fine. I just want to make one point clear. As in the autonomous province of Western Bosnia, the authorities were from the autonomous province of Western Bosnia, did they tell you who held these prisons, who the prisons were controlled by, whether by the authorities of Western Bosnia or your SDG? Answer, those prisons were held by the members of the autonomous province of Western Bosnia. However, the members of the Serbian Volunteer Guard, as well as the Red Berets, also had access and were allowed entrance into the prisons. Question. All right. Now, according to what you know, were the prisoners mistreated by the authorities which had control of the prisons, or were they mistreated by members of the SDG? Which is it? Answer. According to what they said, the prisoners of war were mistreated by the people who would be in prison at the time. And the people who could have been in prison at the time could have been members of the SDG and members of the Red Berets and members of the regular army, that is to say, Fikret Abdic's men, all the people who were there. Question. Yes, but do you know that the regular army of the autonomous province of Western Bosnia was in control of the prisons? I assume you know that. Answer, yes, that's right. Question. You were asked yesterday by Mr. Nice about the volunteers, and your answer was that they had to fill out a form of some kind. Is that right? Answer, yes. Question. You did your best to establish that no people with psychological problems or drug addicts, criminals, or anything of that sort applied. Isn't that right? Answer. As far as criminals are concerned, we weren't able to establish at first glance whether they were criminals or not because we didn't have access to any criminal files, to checking out whether they had any criminal files in the police force. Question, that was precisely my next question. That's what I wanted to ask you. As I made a note of this, your answer, exact answer to Mr. Nice's question, when asked whether they had any criminal record in the police, your answer was that you were not able to check that out because you didn't have the ability and possibility of doing so. Isn't that right? Answer, yes. Question. Well, what kind of cooperation then are you talking about between the police and the Serbian Volunteer Guard in the sense of some sort of sponsorship, auspices, patronage, or anything else? Or command? if
vi niste mogli
you
da
were not
dođete
able to
ni u takav
access
kontakt s policijom da proverite da li neko ima dosije.
files of that kind.
I
You
da li je
weren't
neko kriminalac?
on a position to find out whether somebody was a criminal or not. Answer. We and the public security or police had absolutely no contact with them. But there were so many volunteers that it would be quite impossible for us to check each and every one of them out and to send requests of that sort out every day to the and send lists to the DB for them to have these people checked out and return the lists to us.
Dobro, to znači
Question, all
ipak
right.
da sad
That
menjate
means
iskaz. Znači,
that
vi
you're
ste imali
changing your
mogućnosti,
testimony now. So
a
you
rekli ste
did have
niste
the
imali
possibility of
mogućnosti da
doing so,
proveravate
whereas
da li
you
imaju
said you
dosije.
did not have the possibility of checking this out with the police, whether they had criminal records or not. Answer. When I said we didn't have the possibility of doing so, that's what I was thinking of. There were just too many of them. We couldn't send out the information on a daily basis and have the information returned to us on a daily
Dobro,
basis. That's what
vi
I meant.
kažete
Very
da
well, and you
je
say
državna bezbednost
that the
Srbije
state security of
kad
Serbia
god nije imala ljude
whenever
da
it
zauzmu
lacked
neko mesto,
personnel
uzimala
to take
pripadnike Srpske
control
dobrovoljačke
of a
garde. To ste
location,
rekli
that they
juče,
took
tako?
members of the Serbian
Recite
Volunteer
mi, koje
Guard.
je
That's
to
what you
mesto
said yesterday,
zauzela
didn't you?
DB
Answer
Srbije
yes.
u Bosni
Tell
ili
me,
u bilo
which is the
kojoj
location that the
drugoj
DB of
teritoriji
Serbia captured in
u
Bosnia
Republici
or
Srpskoj
anywhere
Krajini,
else
tako
in
da,
the
koje je to
Republic of
mesto
Serbia,
zauzela
Krajina?
državna bezbednost Srbije?
Which location was captured by the state security of Serbia? Answer, maybe I misspoke when I said captured. What I meant was when they undertook certain operations, such as the one in Velika Kladuša, and they lacked personnel, then they called up the
Dobro,
late
da li ste
commander.
bar čitali novine iz tog
Question.
vremena
And did you
i
read the
znali
papers
za
at the time, and did
uspostavljanje
you know about the
normalnih odnosa između
establishment
autonomne
of
pokrajine
normal
Zapadne
relations
Bosne,
between the
čiji je
autonomous
centar bio u
province
Velikoj
of
Kladuši,
Western Bosnia
Republike Srpske, Savezne Republike
with the center in
Jugoslavije,
Velika Kladuša,
zaključenje
the Republic
trgovinskih
of Srpska,
sporazuma
the Federal
i
Republic of
omogućavanje da ljudi se
Yugoslavia,
slobodno
the
kreću
signing of trade
iz
agreements,
autonomne pokrajine
and
Zapadna Bosna
the
i u
possibilities
Republiku
that
Srpsku
were
i u
ensured for the
Jugoslaviju
free
i da se
passage of
normalno
people
odvija
throughout
promet i
those
roba i
territories
ljudi
and for the
So what's the
normal
relevance of this?
traffic of goods and persons.
This is something.
relevantno je
Did you? Let me ask the witness. B1 tonight, you're being asked about a whole lot of political matters. Did you, in the course of your business or work, know anything about any of this?
Ne.
No,
No. Move on, Mr. Milosevic.
Ja idem dalje, ali
I am moving on.
zar niste čitali bar novine
But didn't
tih
you read the
dana?
papers at
No.
least?
Ste mogli da
That's the
vidite?
question
You
which
could
I.
have seen.
That is the question which I've said you can't ask. It's no point what somebody read in the papers. It's totally irrelevant. Now move on.
Gospodine May,
Mr.
ovde se
May.
radi
Oh,
o...
don't argue all the time. Just move on.
Dobro, gospodine May,
Very well, Mr. May.
vi smatrate da je nerelevantno da li
You
su
consider
institucije
it
autonomne
irrelevant
pokrajine Zapadne Bosne,
if the
Srbije ili
institutions of
Republike
Do you
Western
want
Bosnia,
to-
Serbia, and the Republic
want
of Srpska cooperated?
To continue with this cross-examination, if you do, you will get on with it, or otherwise I shall take it that you've stopped. You prefer to argue about things.
Dobro, na strani 6
Very
svoje
well. On
prve
page
izjave,
6 of your first statement,
odnosno na strani 2
or rather
druge
page
izjave
2 of your
u 8.
second
pasusu,
statement in paragraph 8,
kažete da je Arkan
you
bio
say
agent
that Arkan
Državne
was an
bezbednosti.
agent
Tako.
of the state security. Is that right? Answer, yes.
i da ste to čuli od
And that you
nekog
heard
Karta.
this from
koji
somebody
je
called
zajedno s njim
Kale,
radio.
who worked with him.
A da li vam je
Answer,
poznato
yes. And do you know
da se to odnosilo
that this
svojevremeno na državnu bezbednost
had to do in those
Socijalističke
days
Federativne
to the
Republike
state
Jugoslavije.
security of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia?
Da, i kada
Answer,
sam
yes.
to rekla, ja
And
sam
when I
mislila na
said
državnu
that, I
bezbednost
meant the
SFRJ.
state security
Nisam
of
mislila da je
SFRY.
radio kao agent
I didn't mean that he worked as an agent for the state security of the FRY. as an agent or for the state security of the
A samo da
Republic of Serbia.
preciziramo vreme za koje
Now let us
tvrdite je bio
specify the period of time
povezan sa
for,
državnom
of which you
bezbednošću
say that
SFRJ.
he was linked
To je
to
bilo
the
još u
state
vreme kad
security
je
of
Stane Dolanc
SFRY.
bio ministar
That was
unutrašnjih
during the
poslova,
period
Slovenac,
while
tako?
Stane Dolanc, a Slovene, was still the Minister of the Interior, wasn't
Dobro da
it?
smo
Answer,
to
yes.
pitanje bar raščistili.
Well, I'm glad we've cleared that point up at least.
Na drugoj strani vaše prve
On the
izjave
second page of
vi
your
govorite
first
kako su
statement,
Radovan
you
Stojičić
say that
Bađa
Radovan
i
Stojičić
Arkan
Bađa
u
and
91.
Arkan
godini dobro sarađivali.
cooperated very well in 1991. Is that right? Answer,
Vi to
yes.
znate iz nekog poverljivog
You
izvora,
know that
pretpostavljam,
from
pošto
some
tada niste
confidential
radili tamo.
source, I assume, because you weren't working there at the time. Answer, I know that.
Komandant je pričao o tome,
Because the
a
commander
čak i
spoke
u
about it.
kancelariji imao jednu sliku
And
na kojoj
even
se
in the
nalaze
office, he had a
on
photograph
Bađa,
of him
mislim,
with
Stojčića,
Bađa, I
da
mean
je
the late
kasnije
Stojčić, and later on he removed it.
A dobro,
Question.
recite mi, molim vas, pošto
Tell
ste
me,
juče
please.
rekli
Since you
da je
said
nešto ružno
yesterday
rekao
that he said
o
something
Bađi, samo da vas
offensive
podsjetim,
about
na
Bađa,
drugoj stranici
let
vaše
me
izjave, u
remind you
stvari
that on
prva
the
stranica izjave.
second page, actually the
Prva
first
stranica
page of
izjave
your
se vodi pod
statement,
brojem 2.
but it bears the number
U
2.
drugom pasusu
In the second
vi
paragraph,
kažete
you say,
šverc je uvek opterećivao njihove
smuggling
odnose.
was always a
Govorite
strain
o
on their
odnosu
relationship.
između
You're talking about the
Arkana i
relationship between
policije. U tom
Arkan
pasusu
and the
govorite o Radovanu
police.
Stojčiću.
This is the paragraph
A
in
onda
which you speak
kažete,
about Radovan
policija i
Stojčić. And
državna
then you say,
bezbednost nisu
and I
to
quote, the
odobravali.
police and the state security didn't approve of it.
Barem je meni
At
tako
least
izgledalo.
that is how it
A
appeared
juče
to
ste
me.
rekli
End of quote. But yesterday you
nešto
said
u smislu
something to the
da
effect that
su malte ne i oni švercovali.
even they had been smuggling.
Sam vas ja dobro razumeo ili ne?
Did I understand you correctly or not? Answer.
nije odobravala
The state
da se
security did
švercuje
not
u toj meri.
approve smuggling to
Oni
such
su
an
bili
extent.
svesni
They
da od
were
nečega
aware that
garda mora da
the
se
guard
finansira,
has
da deo novca
to
dolazi od njih,
finance itself
ali
in
nije
some
sve.
way.
Znači, moralo
And
je da
part
se
of the
kupi
money came from them, but not
hrana,
all of it.
garderoba i ostalo.
We
Tako
had
da
to
su
buy
veliku količinu
food,
oni
clothing, and the rest.
to tolerisali.
So that they tolerated it up to a
A
degree.
otkud znate da su uopšte
Question, how
tolerisali
do you
šverc?
know that they tolerated smuggling at
Kao što
all?
znate, policija ima
As
zadatak
you
da spreči
know,
šverc.
it is the duty of the police to
To je stalno
prevent
bilo pitanje
smuggling.
koje se pokretalo
And this was a
i na
constant
političkim
issue
forovima,
that
na
was
sednicama
addressed at
vlade,
political
u
meetings,
izveštajima
at
policije
government
i tako dalje.
meetings,
I vi ovde
in police
kažete,
reports,
policija
and
i
so
DB
on.
nisu
And
to
you say
odobravali.
here that the police and the
Dakle,
DB didn't
Jel
approve
to
of it.
smatrate da su u nekoj
So,
meri odobravali, a u
Are
nekoj
you
meri nisu
saying that
odobravali?
up to a
Da,
point they
smatram
approved
da
and beyond
postojala
that they
mera
didn't?
do
Answer
koje su
yes.
oni
I
odobravali.
believe that there was
Recimo,
a
za
degree
njih
up
je
to
bilo
which
normalno
they
da
would
prođe jedan
tolerate it.
kamion,
For
a ne,
instance, for them it was
recimo,
normal
dva,
for
tri.
one truckload to get through, but not two
A
or
otkud vi
three.
to znate?
And how do you know that?
O čemu?
What?
Pa o tome da je bila mera da prođe jedan kamion, a
That
ne dva, tri kamiona.
they would tolerate one truck and not two or
Zato što
three.
su oni to komentarisali.
Answer, because
Odnosno,
they
sekretarica je komentarisala
Made
sa
comments to that effect,
Koja
or rather the
sekretarica?
secretary with me. Which secretary? Answer,
Jeste se vi
Frankie's
lično
secretary.
upoznali sa tom
Question,
sekretaricom?
did you personally meet
I
that
lično ste je
secretary?
poznavali?
Yes.
Da.
And you knew her
I bili ste
personally?
u
Yes.
prijateljstvu nekom
And
sa njom,
you were on friendly
rekla
terms with
prijateljstvo,
her.
više
I
bih
wouldn't
rekla
say
poznanstvo.
friendly, it was more of an
tako.
acquaintance.
Juče vas je pitao
Question, yesterday,
u glavnom ispitivanju
in the
gospodin
examination
Najs,
chief,
pošto
you
ste
were asked by
govorili
Mr.
onda o
Nice,
Frankiju i Jovici
when you spoke
Stanišiću,
about Frankie and
da
Jovica
li vam je
Stanišić,
kad rekla o tome,
whether she
da li su
ever
komentarisali neki odnos
told
sa mnom?
you
Jel
whether
tako?
they had commented on
Vi
their
ste rekli
relationship
ne.
with me. Is that right? Yes. And you said no.
A dobro, da li je
Yes, that's
ikad,
right. No.
da li sam ikad ja ili neko
Question.
od mojih saradnika
Did
imao bilo kakav
I
kontakt
or
sa,
any of my
sa vama
associates
ili,
ever
odnosno ne
have
sa vama
any
lično,
contact
nego
with
kad
you?
kažem
Not with you
dobrovoljačkom gardu i
personally,
tako
but I
dalje.
mean the volunteer guard and so on. Answer,
Recite mi,
no.
molim vas,
Mislim na vaše lične saradnike.
I'm talking about your personal associates.
Iz vašeg kabineta.
From your
Lične saradnike.
cabinet, from your office. No. The
sad
answer is
molim
no.
vas, recite mi, pošto
Question.
kažete da su se oni
Since you
izdržavali
say that
između ostalog
they
još Šverca,
finance
vi
themselves
ste čitav jedan
among
pasus
other
ovde
ways by
nabrojali,
smuggling. And here
sad ne
there's a
čitam,
whole
da ne bi uzimao
paragraph.
vreme,
I don't wish
raznih
to read
donatora
it
Srpske
so as
dobrovoljačke
not to
garde.
waste
Jel'
time.
tako?
The various
Da, bilo je
donors
Jeste,
of
pa
the
vas je onda
Serb
prekinuo
Volunteer
gospodin
Guard.
Nice
Yes,
da ne
there were
idete dalje.
donors too.
Vi ste
And then Mr.
pročitali
Nice interrupted you and
samo
said you
ili
needn't go
Giovannija Di
on. You just
Stefana
read out Giovanni
i
Di Stefano
Karić.
and the Karic
To ste
brothers.
rekli juče.
You said that
Sinoć sam
yesterday.
video na
Answer yes.
televiziji da Karići
Yesterday
demantuju da su
on
ikad
television, I
sponzorisali
hear the
bilo
Karićis
kakvu
denying that they
formaciju
ever
koja je bilo gde
sponsored any
ratovala
formation that
na
waged
prostorima
war
nekadašnje
anywhere in the
Jugoslavije.
territory of the former Yugoslavia.
Doesn't matter about what the Karadzics said on television. No doubt they would say that. Yes, let's move on.
Dobro, vi ovde imenujete advokata
Question.
Tomu Filu,
But
koji
you're
radi
naming
i za
here
ovu
attorney
instituciju
Toma
ovde.
Fila, which is
Možda
working
da
for
li je
this
on bio
institution
u
here
nekom
too.
predmetu branilac
Was
nekoga
he
iz
defense
Srpske dobrovoljačke
counsel
garde, pa po tom
for a
osnovu
member of
bio
the
u
Serbian
kontaktu,
Volunteer Guard
ili vi
and
tvrdite da je
was
on
in
novčano
contact with you on that
pomagao
basis,
Srpskoj
or are you
dobrovoljačkoj
saying that
gardi?
he financially assisted the
bio
Serbian
jedan od
Volunteer Guards?
donatora Srpske
Answer, he was one of the sponsors, the donors for the Serbian Volunteer Guard. He may have not have provided money, but he could have assisted
A na
in
kakav
other
način bi on
ways.
to mogao da pomaže
Question,
Srpskoj
and
dobrovoljačkoj
what
gardi?
other ways could he assist the Guard? Answer, with the
znači da se
help
mogao da
of
pojavi kao
his
branilac u nekom
attorney's
predmetu, tako?
office, which means he
Pa
could
to mu
act
je
as
valjda
defense
posao.
counsel. Answer, yes.
Jeste.
But surely that's his job. Answer, it is.
Dakle, šta tu ima
So
nelegalno?
what's
Ako
illegal
advokat
there?
radi
What's
svoj
wrong
posao.
with that if an attorney is doing his own work?
U vezi sa tabulatorom 4,
Regarding tab 4,
vi ste rekli,
you said,
koliko sam ja zapisao,
According
ja sam
to
doduše
my
dobio
notes,
samo taj tabulator,
but true,
Na
I only
engleskom.
received that tab in English,
ne na srpskom, vi ste
not in
verovatno
Serbian.
spisak sastavili na
You
srpskom
probably
jeziku.
compiled the list in Serbian, though, didn't you? Answer yes.
Sada, rekli ste da ste u taj spisak
You said
uneli
that you entered in the
pripadnike
list members
The list is in Serbian. It's on the right-hand side of the page.
Vi ste rekli da ste u taj
You
spisak
said
u svom sećanju,
that
pretpostavljam,
on the basis of your
uneli
recollection, I
pripadnike
assume,
Srpske dobrovoljačke
you
garde i
entered
Crveni beret.
members
Jel'
of the Serbian Volunteer Guard and the Red Berets. Is that
Sad mi
right? Answer
objasnite
yes.
neka imena.
Now explain a few
Evo,
names
na
for me,
primjer,
please.
Abdić
For
Fikret.
instance, Abdić Fikret.
Da.
Da li smatrate da je on
Yes.
bio pripadnik Srpske
Question, do you
dobrovoljačke
consider
garde ili
him
Crveni
to have
beret?
been a member of the Serb Volunteer Guard or the
Ali ste ga
Red
stavili na
Berets?
spisak
Answer no.
pod-
Question,
brojem
but you
jedan.
put him on the list as
On
number
svakako
one.
nije bio
He
pripadnik ni
certainly
garde ni
wasn't a
bereta.
member of the Guards
tako?
or the Berets, was he? Answer no.
Giovanni Di Stefano,
Giovanni
koga ste
Di
naveli kao
Stefano,
donatora.
whom you mentioned as a
Prema podacima
sponsor.
koje ja imam,
And according to data
bio je
available
član
to me,
Stranke
he
Srpskog
was a
jedinstva.
member of the Party of Serbian
General
Unity.
Srpske
Yes,
dobrovoljačke
and a
garde.
pa
general
je se
of the
borio
Serbian
negde na
Volunteer
nekom
Guard.
ratištu.
Did he fight in any
Dakle, to
theater
je
of war? Answer,
dobio
he
kao
did not.
nekakvu
So he was
počasnu
given this rank as
funkciju
some sort of an honorary
zbog članstva u
title because of
stranci i
his
ugleda
membership
koji je
in the
imao
party
u
and the
poslovnim
reputation
krugovima,
that he enjoyed in business circles.
Ili zbog
Answer,
novca
and
koji je
because of the
davao,
money
verovatno.
he contributed.
Ali nije se nigde
Yes,
borio.
probably
tako?
because of the money too, but he didn't fight anywhere, did he?
Onda
Answer,
kažete
no.
Ljuban Ećim.
Then you mentioned Ljuban Ečim.
Je li on bio član Srpske dobrovoljačke garde?
Was he a member of the Serbian Volunteer
Osoba
Guard?
koja je sa
He was a
gardom
person
bila u području Banja Luke.
who was
On
with
je
the
bio
guards
vođa
in the
Crvenog
area of
bereta
Banja
Banja
Luka. He was the leader
Pa
of the
dobro,
Red Berets for
zar,
Banja Luka.
ne piše ovde da je on
Doesn't it
šef
say here
državne
that
bezbednosti
he
Republike
was
Srpske u
head
Banja Luci?
of the state security of Republika
Prema tome,
Srpska
on
in Banja
nije
Luka?
ni
Answer,
član
yes,
Srpske
that's what he
dobrovoljačke
was.
garde ni crvenih beretki.
Therefore, he's
Nego
not a
šef
member
državne
of the
bezbednosti
Serbian
Republike
Volunteer
Srpske u
Guards
Banja
or the
Luci,
Red
tako ili ne?
Berets, but rather the head of the state security of Republika Srpska. Is that right or not? Answer, yes, that's right.
Onda ste stavili Kariće u spisak,
Then you put the
da su
Karićis
Karići
in
bili
the list.
članovi Srpske dobrovoljačke
Were
garde
the
i
Karići
crvenih beretki.
members of the Serbian Volunteer Guards or the Red Berets? Answer, that list was compiled
Znači, stavljene su sve osobe koje
to
sam ja
include
pomenula,
all the
koji su na
persons
bilo
that
koji
I
način
mentioned who in
imali
any way
kontakt sa nama.
whatsoever
Znači,
had
to
any
nisu samo
contact with
pripadnici
us.
srpske
They were not just
dobrovoljačke garde.
members of the Serbian
Znači, to smo
Volunteer
stavili-
Guards.
Ja sam stavila
I
ljude,
put
znači,
on
koji
the
su na bilo
list
koji način
people
dolazili u kontakt sa
who
strankom
came
Srpskog
into
jedinstva i
contact
Srpskog
with the
dobrovoljačkog
Serbian
garda.
Unity Party and the Serbian
Braća
Volunteer
Karić
Guards
su
in
čak i
any
kupili
way whatsoever.
ambulantne kola za
The
Srpsku
Karić
dobrovoljačku
brothers
gardu
even
tokom
bought
leta
an
95.
ambulance for the
Čekajte, to je
Serbian
drugo.
Volunteer Guards in the summer of
Poznato je da
1995.
su oni
Question.
pomagali
That is something else.
medicinske
Wait a moment.
ustanove
It is well known that they
i
assisted medical
verovatno mnogima od njih
institutions
kupili ambulantna
and
kola i
probably
davali priloge
purchased
bolnicama.
ambulances for many and
Potpuno,
made contributions to hospitals
na principu nediskriminacije.
on a non-discriminatory basis. You are aware of that. Answer, yes, but I also know that
platili
they
novac.
paid in money on
Za
the
kupovinu
account for the
ambulantnog
Delias.
Ne,
Question for the purchase of an
ambulantna kola su
ambulance?
posebno
Answer,
kupili.
no. They bought an
Donirali,
ambulance
a uplatili
separately
su
and
novac
gave it as a gift,
na račun
but they
zadruge
also
Delije.
invested
šta je ta
money
zadruga
into
Delije?
the Delia Cooperative.
Zadruga
And what is
Delije
that
je bila
cooperative?
jedna od
Answer,
kompanija
the
koja je
Delia
posjedovao
Cooperative
pokojni
was
Željko
one of the
Ražnjatović.
companies
Da li je to
owned
onda
by
bio
the
možda
late
neki poslovni
Željko
odnos?
Ražnjatović Arkan. Question, was
Ne,
that
sa
some sort of a
sigurnošću
business
znam.
Koja je
relationship?
kompanija?
Answer, no. Well, if it's a company,
Da, ali zadruga
answer
Delije
yes, but
nije
the
ništa radila
Delia
sa Karićem.
Cooperative didn't have any business
Kako vi to možete
with the
znati kad vi niste
Karićis.
bili u toj
How
zadruzi?
can you know that when you weren't in that cooperative?
Zadruga Delije je
Answer,
bila,
the Delia
oni su
cooperative
nama donosili njima novac.
would bring us money and we would take money to them. The money from the bakery and from the cake shop would be carried to them and paid into their account. If they wanted to buy something for us, they would frequently say that they didn't have the money to do it. That firm
Dobro,
was
molim vas, na spisak ste stavili Mihalja
not
Kertesa, koji
working
je
very
bio
well.
direktor
You put Mihail
Carine jedno
Kertes
vreme. Jel on
on
bio
the
crvena
list,
beretka
who was
ili član Srpske
director
dobrovoljačke
of
garde?
the customs service for a while. Was he a member of either of these? No, he was not a member of the Red Berets or the SDG. He would be the person to call when a truck would be detained at the border crossing.
Dobro, ali vi ste juče objasnili
Yes, but you
da
explained
je taj
yesterday
kamion
that that
po
truck,
onome kako ste vi to radili,
according to the
samo
way in which
prelazio
you
preko teritorije
operated,
SRJ
just
od jedne
transited
granice do
the
druge i
territory
išao u
of
istočnu Slavoniju.
FRY from one border to another and went on to eastern Slavonia. Answer, yes, and then those
Kakve
same
veze
goods would
Kertes
come
onda ima
back
s
to
tim?
Belgrade. Well,
Ako
what
granicu
then has
s
Kertes
jedne i
got
s
to
druge
do with
strane
it?
pređe
If
zapečaćen
the
kamion koji se
sealed
pusti,
truck
koji znači nije
crosses
namenjen
the
uvozu u
border
Jugoslaviju,
at both
kakve veze onda
ends
ima on
and
s vašim
is not
švercom,
importing
kad onda
goods
na
to
malo
Yugoslavia?
raznim vašim
What
vozilima
has
to
he
prenosite
got
iz
to
Istočne
do with your
Slavonije?
smuggling when afterwards in small vehicles you transport those goods to Slavonia? Answer, because if the truck was stopped, it would never wait. Usually trucks had to wait for a long time. And once Milica called up, and she was the secretary of Kertes, and she would be called by Arkan, the truck would be released. Question. So he asked for some sort of intervention for the goods to be allowed to pass on to Eastern Slavonia. Answer, yes, but for Eastern Slavonia, not Yugoslavia.
To je sad stvar vašeg
Yes,
šverca,
but
ja vas pitam
afterwards
za
those
ovo,
goods
za ovaj
ended
odnos
up
sa carinom.
in Belgrade.
Onda ste
That's
upisali
that's a
Dušana
matter
Lončara,
of your
komandanta
smuggling, and
Vojske
it has
Republike
nothing to
Srpske
do with
krajine
the customs.
u istočnoj Slavoniji.
You also mentioned Dusan Lončar. Was he a member of the Red Berets or of the Serbian Volunteer Guards? Answer, no.
Upisali ste i
You have
Aleksandra
included
Martinovića,
Alexander
koji je nosio brašno
Martinović, who
za
carried
Arkanovu pekaru.
flour
vozač
for
u-
Arkan's bakery, and he was a
štabu.
driver in the
Jel on bio
headquarters.
borac neki
Was he a
ili
fighter
član Srpske
or a
dobrovoljačke
member
gardije
of
ili
the
radio
Serbian
kao
volunteer
šofer koji nosi
guards, or
brašno u
was he
pekaru?
working as a driver carrying flour for the bakery? Answer.
Jer je
The flour is important because that flour was taken from the Red Cross
i nošeno za Arkanovu pekaru.
and
Kako su
carried
mogli
for
dobiti brašno
Arkan's
iz Crnog
bakery.
Krsta
How
za-
could
za
you get
pekaru?
the flour from
To
the
je
Red Cross
komercijalni
for the
posao.
bakery when that is a commercial establishment?
A pekara je komercijalni
A
posao, kako su
bakery
mogli
is
dobiti od
a
Crvenog Krsta brašno?
commercial establishment. How could you get flour from the Red Cross? Answer. Because the Serbian Volunteer Guard could, on the basis of something, I don't know what, myself,
Aleksandar Martinović
Alexander Martinović was a driver in the headquarters of the SDG, and he would go to the Red Cross, and he would always say that he would have to wait until Frankie's men took what they needed from the Red Cross, after which he would take flour and cooking oil, which were essential for the bakery.
Wait a moment. Pause. Pause between question and answer.
Dobro. Matović,
All right, Matović, Tomo,
Mirko Tomov, kako
Mirko
kažete,
Tomov, as you say,
novinar
a
koji je
journalist
izveštavao
who
o Srpskoj dobrovoljačkoj gardi. A je
wrote
on bio
about
član
the
neke vojne
SDG. Was he a
jedinice
member
ili
of
je
any
bio novinar
military
koji je
unit, or was he a
pratio-
journalist who
pratio jedinicu i
attended,
izveštavao o
who
tome?
followed the unit
novine.
and informed the public, wrote in the papers about it? Answer. He was a journalist and he worked for the Party of
Dakle, nije
Serbian
bio
Unity.
nikakav borac, je li tako?
Question. So he wasn't a fighter of any kind.
A onda govorite o Jugoslavu
And then you
Mićiću,
speak about Jugoslav
Jugi,
Mićić,
koji je
Juga,
bio vozač
who was a
u štabu
driver
u Beogradu,
at the
a
headquarters in
poginuo
Belgrade,
u Kladuši. To vam je
and
jedan
he
od ta
died
dva
in
poginula, je li
Kladusha,
tako?
though he was one of the two killed. Is that right?
A
Answer
dobro,
yes.
da li dozvoljavate da je
All
možda
right. Do you allow
poginuo
for the fact
zato
that he
što
might
ga je
have
negde
perhaps
kao
been killed
vozača koji je
because as a driver
nešto pogodila
transporting?
A da li je
Question,
vama
all right.
poznato
Now, do you know
da su upravo od
that
strane
it was precisely the leadership
autonomne
of the
pokrajine
autonomous
Zapadna
province of
Bosna,
Western Bosnia
oni bili unajmljeni da
that
pomažu
they were
kao
hired out to
instruktori
help as
armiji
instructors
autonomne pokrajine
to help
Zapadna
the
Bosna.
army of the autonomous province of Western Bosnia. Do you know that? Answer yes.
Da li vam je poznato, dakle,
Question. Well,
da
do
je
you
novac
therefore also know
koji je
that the
za to
money
dolazio,
which
vi
was
kažete
sent
preko
for those
SDD-a,
purposes, you say
bio
through the
novac koji su vlasti
SDG,
autonomne
was
pokrajine
the money
Zapadna
that
Bosna
the authorities
plaćale
of the autonomous
za
province of Western Bosnia
posao koji je
paid out
trebalo
for
oni
the
da obave, a
jobs
to je
that they were
znači
supposed to
obuka,
do. That is to
instruktaža
say,
i
the
tako dalje.
training for the instructors and so on. Answer yes, they received money from Fikret Abdic during the Velika Kladoša event. But it didn't stop there with training. The members of the guard were at the mention of female here. Her name was Mirjana. Answer not
Marijana,
Mirjana,
dobro.
but Mariana. Question,
Kažete
all right,
da je ubila
Mariana.
zatvorenika
And
u
you say
Kladuši.
that she killed a prisoner in Kladusha. Answer
Je li ona
yes.
bila član Srpske
Question,
dobrovoljačke
was she a
garde?
member of the Serb volunteer guard? Answer
Znači,
yes.
imali ste i žene
Question,
članove
so
Srpske
you had
dobrovoljačke garde.
female members too in the SDG, did you? Answer, she was the only one, the only woman up at the front.
A otkud znate da je ona ubila
Question, how do you
zatvorenika?
know that she killed a prisoner? Answer, because the wounded men talked about it.
I vi ste sigurni svaku stvar koju neko
Question,
vama ispriča da je
and
ona
you believe
istinita.
everything that people say?
That's a comment.
Dobro, pitao sam vas
Question.
za Pelevića.
I
Pelević
asked you
je
about
bio
Pelević.
politički rukovodilac i
Pelević
sad je
was a
predsjednik
political
stranke
figure. He is
Srpskog jedinstva i
still the
narodni
president
poslanik.
of the Serbian Unity Party, and he's still a deputy
Dakle, on
today,
se
right?
bavio
Answer yes.
političkim
Question.
delovanjem stranke Srpskog
So
jedinstva. On nije bio
he was in the political
pripadnik Srpske
realm
dubrovačke
of the
garde
party
u
of
borbenom
Serbian
smislu,
unity. He
tako ili
wasn't a
nije?
member of the SDG in a combat sense. Answer, while I was there, it was as you put it, as you said.
Dobro.
That's right. Question, all right, fine.
Da pokušam da skratim, vrlo mi je kratko vreme.
Let me try and get through this as quickly as possible. I have very little time.
Molim vas, recite mi, vi ste ovde
Question, tell me
govorili
please.
u jednom
You,
kontekstu, pa vas
spoke
molim ako možete
here
se toga setite,
at one point, and I'd like to ask you
nešto
to
kao kada bi trebalo
remember
nešto da pređe preko
think
Rače,
back,
išlo
that if
noću
something had to be transferred across Racha, they would do it by night.
i na neki način se
Something to that
švercovalo.
effect. And in fact, it was something being smuggled,
Jel' tako?
right?
Šverc se nije
Answer.
odnosio na prelaz Rače.
The smuggling didn't refer to the transfer across the Vraća. I was talking about some goods
To se
there,
odnosilo na period
and I was referring to the period of the Banja Luka operation and after that.
korišćenje prelaz Rača,
So this
koji smo upotrebljavali
crossing point,
naša
Rača,
i naša
would be
vozila
used.
pređu.
We would call up a certain number and our vehicle would be able to cross at that point.
Da su naše vlasti
Question, all right. Now, are you aware of the fact that our
posle
authorities,
onog odbijanja Vensovenovog plana na
after
Skupštini
the
Republike
rejection of the
Srpske,
Van-Soen plan
maja
at
93.
Republika Srpska in
godine,
May
uveli blokadu
1993, introduced a blockade?
Da li se sećate
Are you aware of
toga?
that? Do you remember that?
A
Answer,
da li se
yes.
sećate toga
Question, and do
da su
you
onda
also
došli
remember
međunarodni monitori
that
da
the
kontrolišu tu
international
blokadu?
monitors arrived to monitor and
Pa da li
supervise the
znate da je
blockade? Answer,
Taj
yes.
monitoring bio i na
Question, and do
Rači,
you know
odnosno na
that
svim
that
prelazima.
monitoring applied to Racha and all the border crossing
Pa kako
points?
su oni onda,
Answer,
pored tih
yes.
međunarodnih
Question, well,
monitora,
how then
mogli
were they
da
able, with those international
idu sa svim
monitors
tim
in place,
teretima o kojima vi govorite?
to transport all those goods and
Od nas je traženo samo
freight? Answer.
kad imamo
We were
nešto
just
za
asked
jedinicu
that
koja se
whenever we
nalazi
had
u
something
Banja
for a
Luci,
unit which was located in
samo
Banja
najavimo
Luka,
na Rači
that all we
da
had
će
to
oni
do
stići do
was to
Banja
tell
Luke.
them at Racha and that the goods would be delivered to Banja Luka.
Dobro, to je jedino što vi znate o
Question,
tome.
all right, and is that all you know about the whole business?
Kako mislite jedino?
Pa da
How
li
do you
vam je
mean the
poznato
only
da je bila
thing?
kontrola međunarodnih
Question, well,
posmatrača,
do you know that the
ne posmatrača,
international
nego
observers,
kontrolora na
not
tim svim prelazima?
observers, but
Znam,
controllers
zato
were
smo
in
ne
place at all
imali
those
više
crossing
uvek
points?
bezbednosti kad prelazimo.
Answer, yes, that's why we
Jer se
would
nismo
inform the
ne
DB when we were
bili na
crossing.
prelazu kod Erduta.
We didn't, for example, call in for the crossing at
Dobro.
Erdut. Question, all
Vi
right.
kažete da ste
Now you also say
2-3 puta
that
nedeljno
on
razgovarali sa
2 or 3
Frankijevom
times a week you would
sekretaricom,
talk to Frankie's secretary, is that right? Yes.
I ona vam je
Question,
govorila
and
da
she would
on ne
tell
može da
you
donese odluku
that
bez
he would not
odobrenja
be able to
Jovice
make a
Stanišića.
decision without approval from
To mi
Jovica
nije
Stanisic,
govorila.
right?
Da, to mi je rekla.
Answer, yes, yes, that's
Pa
what she told
nije
me.
mi jasno
Question, well, I'm not quite clear
kako i u
here.
kom svojstvu može sekretarica
How is a
sekretarici
secretary
drugoj da
able to tell
objašnjava
another
šta
secretary and
njen šef
explain to
može
another
ili ne može
secretary
da
what her
odluči,
boss
kakve to ima
can
veze
or
sa vašim
cannot
poslom?
decide? What's that
Ko
got
vam
to
je to
do
rekao
with
da
your line of business, your job? Who told you to say that?
Nisam razumela pitanje.
I'm not sure I follow you.
Precizno.
Could you be more specific?
Apsurdna vaša
Question.
tvrdnja,
Well,
pa
your
vas
claim
zbog
is
toga
fairly
pitam,
absurd,
kako
and
je
that's
to
why I'm
moguće
asking you,
da
how is it
vama
possible?
sekretarica
How
jednog
come the
funkcionera
secretary
državne
of
bezbednosti objašnjava
a functionary in
koga
the state
treba njen
security
šef da pita
goes
ko može
into
da donese
explanations
odluku ili
as
ne?
to
Da li vam
what
se
her
to
boss
čini
can or
logično?
cannot decide?
Jednostavno, ja
Does that seem to
sugeriram
you
da
to
ste
be
vi to
logical?
izmislili.
I am
Ili da
putting
vam je
it
neko
to
rekao
you
da
that
to
you
kažete.
thought all that up, or
Ja
otherwise
sam
somebody told you to
izmislila
say
da je
that.
njena rečenica,
Answer, that is not something I thought up myself. It's her statement, her sentence, so I'm just conveying to you what she said. I didn't think it up myself, nor did anybody suggest that I say it. If it is not logical, then it is up to her and not me.
Dakle, tvrdite da je
That's her
vama
affair.
ona
Question. So you
kako
claim that she
funkcioniše njen
explained to
šef
you how
i
her
koga
boss
on mora da
worked
pita.
and
No,
who he
that's a
had to
comment.
ask for permission,
Dobro.
etc. All right, very well.
Vi ste,
That's a comment.
rekli ste,
Just a moment.
Microphone, please.
Not right. Let's get it right. The transcript should say, that's a comment. Now let's go on.
bio bih vam zahvalan, gospodine May, kad
I
bi
would be very
ispravljali
grateful to you,
transkript i
Mr.
kad
May, if you were to
netačno
correct the
zabeleže ono što ja
transcript
govorim.
when they record erroneously what I myself am saying.
Jer ja
You
nemam
can always,
vremena.
you could do it yourself, Mr. Milosevic, if you're concerned.
Svedokinjo 129.
Witness
Rekli ste
129.
kako je Arkan uvek išao
You
kod
said
Frankija.
that Arkan would always go to see Frankie. Answer yes.
A niste videli
Question.
nikad da je
And you
Frenki bio
never
kod
saw Frankie come and see Arkan. Answer, he only came once, and it was early in the morning in the
Dobro,
parking
to
lot.
sam čuo juče.
Question, yes, I heard you say
Vi ste
that
ga
yesterday.
videli
So you
na
saw him
parkingu
in a parking lot.
da ulazi ili izlazi iz
You saw him
automobila.
coming into his car or leaving his car. Answer, he was standing in our parking lot when I came to work in the morning. I asked the guard who the gentleman was, and he said that that was
Osoba koja traži komandanta.
a person looking for the commander. Afterwards, I called the commander up. The commander came from home with the 05,
I zatim su oni otišli.
and they left then. And the commander later on told me who the man was.
Vi ste govorili
Question.
o tome da
You said
su bile bliske veze sa
that there were
DB-om.
close ties with the
Da li je iko
DB?
od Srpske dobrovoljačke garde
Did
bio
anyone
pripadnik
from the
DB-a?
was anyone from the SDG a member of the DB?
Da li mislite
Answer.
toku ratnih
Do you mean
operacija?
during the war
Ja
operations?
mislim u
Answer.
toku sveg
What I mean
onoga
is
što vi
throughout,
znate. Ili da preciziram
throughout
pitanje.
all the things and
Da
time
li
you
je
know about, or
bilo
let me be
ko
more
od
specific.
njih
Did any
imao,
one of them
legitimaciju
have
državne bezbednosti?
an ID card affiliating him to the DB? Answer no.
Vrlo dobro.
That's fine.
Kažete da su prevoženi, da
You
je
also
prevoženo neko
say
naoružanje.
that some sort of
Pitao vas je
weaponry
gospodin Nice.
was transported.
rekli
Mr. Nice
samo
asked you something
pištolji i
about that, and
uniforme.
your answer
Jel
was
tako?
just pistols and uniforms. Is that right? Answer yes.
Pitao vas je da li su u Beogradu
Question, he also asked you
mogla da budu
whether
korišćena vozila
in
sa
Belgrade they
vukovarskom
could use
tablicom.
vehicles with Vukovar
li
license
sećate
plates.
tog
Do you remember that question? Answer
A
yes,
da li
I
se
do.
sećate
Question,
da
well,
su
do
sa
you
svim
also remember
tablicama iz
that
bivših
people would drive
jugoslovenskih
around with
republika
number plates from all the
mogla
former
da se vide
Yugoslav
vozila na
republics? You could
ulicama
see
Beograda
cars on
i
the streets of Belgrade with
skopskim i
different
vukovarskim
license
i
plates from Skopje, from
zagrebačkim
Vukovar,
i
from Zagreb, from
bjeljinskih i
Bijeljina,
slovenačkim
from
i tako dalje.
Slovenia, and so on.
Da.
Answer yes.
Dakle, nikakve specifičnosti nema
So there
u
was
korišćenju
nothing
bilo
special
kakvih
in
vukovarskih
the
tablica,
use
je li
of
tako ili ne?
Vukovar license plates. This was nothing out of the ordinary, isn't that right? Answer yes. Right.
Dobro.
Question very well, fine.
Pitao vas je
He
gospodin
also
Nice
asked you,
o
Mr. Nice
novcu
also asked you
koji je
about
stizao
money,
iz operacije
the
Velika
money that
Kladuša,
came in from the Velika Kladuša
odnosno
operation, or rather,
gde su plaćani oni.
where they
Pitao
were
vas je, a
paid.
odakle Abdiću
He
novac? Vi ste
said
rekli
where
da ne
Abdić,
znate.
he asked you where
Kakve
Abdić got
veze-
his money from, and your answer was that you
Kakve
don't
veze
know.
mogu oni da
Question,
imaju sa poreklom Abdićevog novca?
what do they have to do with
Da
the
li ste ikad
source of
ustanovili neku takvu vezu?
Abdić's money? Did you ever establish a link
sa novcem
Answer, what do you mean, links with Fikret Abdić's money or funds? How do you mean?
Rukovodstvo autonomne pokrajine Zapadna
Question,
Bosna
the
koje je angažovalo
leadership of the autonomous province of Western Bosnia,
te
the authorities who
instruktore,
engaged the instructors in the first place,
stručnjake
and experts,
Srpske
professionals
dobrovoljačke garde je
from the
plaćalo
SDG.
za tu obavezu.
They
Je li tako?
paid for the
I to je
services
novac
rendered,
koji je
right?
dolazio
Answer, yes. Question,
do
so
vas
that was
i
the money
odatle su
that
plaćani
reached
ljudi
you
koji su obavljali
and
te
which was
poslove, je li
used to pay out the people who did the job.
je dolazio do mene
Answer, the
samo
money reached me,
novac za ranjenike.
only money
Oni
for the
su
wounded.
direktno plaćeni na
They would be
terenu,
directly
borci.
paid in the
Dobro,
field, the
oni
fighters,
tamo
the
na
combatants.
terenu, jer su
Question,
bili
all
tamo,
right, in the
a
field because they
ranjenici
were
koji su
there.
bili u
And the
Beogradu,
wounded men who were in
stizala im je odande
Belgrade,
plata
they would get their
i vi ste im
salaries
to
from
delili
over
u
there
Beogradu,
and you
tako?
would distribute their salaries
I to
to
je
them in
bio
Belgrade.
novac
That's right, isn't it? Answer,
vlasti
yes.
autonomne
Question, and
pokrajine
that money
Zapadna Bosna,
belonged to
tako?
the authorities of the autonomous province of Western Bosnia.
dobro.
They were their funds, is that right? Answer, yes. Right, fine.
Vi ste juče komentarisali jednu fotografiju
Yesterday you
koju vam je
commented on a
prikazala druga
photograph
strana
shown to you by the opposite side
kao fotografiju iz
as being
Bijeljine.
a
Vi ste
photograph
rekli
from
da to nije
Bijeljina, and you
Bijeljina,
said
nego
that it
Brčko,
wasn't
je li tako?
Bijeljina but Brčko. That's right, isn't it?
Da
Answer,
ste
yes.
prepoznali
And you said that you
Srđana
recognized Srđan
Golubovića, koji ima
Golubović,
nadivak Max. je li tako?
nicknamed Max, right? Yes, yes,
Da li
that's
je
right.
tačno
Question,
da
is it
taj
true and
Srđan
correct that
Golubović
that
Max
man, Srđan
nema nikakve
Golubović
veze
Max,
sa
had
ubistvom,
nothing to
niti
do
bilo
with the
kakvu
killing
odgovornost sa
or
ubistvom
any
te osobe koja se
responsibility
vidi na
for the
fotografiji?
killing of the person seen on the photograph? Answer, yes, and I said that too. That's what I stated.
Meni, prema mojim
That, to the
saznanjima,
best of
on je
my
došao
knowledge,
do te- znači, prišao je toj ženi već kad
he
je ona
went
bila-
up to the woman when the woman was already
Fotografija je,
dead.
dakle, napravljena
Question, so
kad
the
su oni
photograph
došli
was
i
made when they
nastoje da
arrived
identifikuju o čemu se
and
radi,
tried
da
to
vide da li je
identify what
u
had
pitanju
happened or to
ranjenik
see
ili
whether it
neko
was a
ko je već
wounded
poginuo.
person or somebody
Dakle,
who had already
nikakve
died.
veze to ubistvo
That is to
nema
say
sa
that the killing
aktivnošću
had
Srpske
nothing to do with the
dobrovoljačke
activities of the Serbian volunteer guard. Answer, as far as that particular photograph was concerned, why they went up there, I can only guess. All I know is that the man Max said that he had a lot of problems because he approached that woman with a rifle in his hands, trying to turn her over, turn her body over. That's what Max told me. Question, well, he had problems because he was in the vicinity of a dead person generally. And as far as I understand it, you have no information or knowledge as to his accountability, or that he was responsible, or that any of the members of the SDG was responsible for the death of that particular individual. That's right, isn't it? Answer, yes, that's right.
Vi nikad niste vidjeli Radovana Stojića
Question,
Bađu,
you never
tako?
saw Radovan Stojičić Bađa, did you? Answer,
Ali
personally,
čuli ste
no.
da je izbacio iz
Question,
Erduta
but you heard that he threw
Arkana i da je zato
Arkan
Arkan
out of
bio
Erdut
ljut,
and that Arkan was angry because of that.
da li vam je
Answer,
poznato
yes.
da je on
Question, well, do
pomagao
you know
da
that
se
he
uvede
helped
red
introduce
na
law and
poziv vlasti
order
Republike
when he
Srpske
was invited to
Krajine
do so by the authorities
i
of
da je,
Srpska
s obzirom da je
Krajina,
imao autoritet,
in view of the
jedino on
fact
i
that
mogao
he
da
wielded
izbaci
a
njih iz
great deal
Erduta.
of authority. He was the only one that could have thrown them out of Erdut.
Ne.
Answer, no.
Ali vi ste juče pomenuli
But you yesterday mentioned
Radovana Stojičića
Radovan Stojičić
i neku njegovu vezu sa
and
nekakvim švercom.
his links to some kind of
Pošto je on bio vrlo
smuggling,
jedan častan čovjek i
as he was a
patriota.
very
Da li
respected
vi
man and a
imate
patriot.
bilo kakvo
Do
saznanje
you
da se
have
on
any
bilo
knowledge
kada bavio
whatsoever
nekakvim švercom?
that he in fact
Well,
did
wait a
engage in
moment.
smuggling of any kind?
Just wait a moment. The accused is alleging that Stojacic was a respected man. Do you know if that's right?
Uvaženi čovjek. Dosta poštovanja, znate li je to točno?
Ne znam.
No,
I
that's
don't know.
That's your suggestion. All the evidence is that he was involved in the smuggling. Let's move on.
U smislu dokaznog materijala pred sudom je da je on sudjelovao u švercu.
Ne, Gospodine May,
No,
ja
Mr.
sam
May.
shvatio da svedokinja upravo
I
kaže
understood the
suprotno,
witness to
da
say
ona
quite
nema
the
nikakav
opposite,
podatak o
that she
tome da je
has
on
no
učestvovao.
information of
Je li
him
tačno,
participating in any kind of
svedokinja
smuggling.
129?
Is that right, witness 129? Answer: you didn't allow me to complete what I was saying. Well, please go ahead then.
Prema
According to the stories told by Arkan,
ljud.
as to why he was angry,
Ljud za kamp.
he was angry because of the camp, and he was also angry because the two of them